There are certain epiphanies in life, those wonderful moments when the lights go on and you suddenly realize some important life truth, those moments when a seemingly impossible concept in math or physics or biology just suddenly makes sense. Or for people like me, those moments when a particular passage from Soren Kierkegaard's writing just suddenly, it's like bursting out of a cloud into the bright sunlight, that there's some insight that just breaks on you. But not all epiphanies are that great. Some epiphanies are more like, oh, or even, oh no. It may be that I pay too much attention to election politics, but I suspect that I am not alone in this room for having been terribly interested in the special election for a Senate seat in Alabama this week. There were a lot of cheap dime store novel dimensions to this election. When Jeff Sessions gave up his seat to become Attorney General, then Governor Robert Bentley in Alabama appointed the state's Attorney General, Luther Strange, to temporarily fill the slot. At the time, Luther Strange was the Attorney General in Alabama, and he was investigating Governor Bentley for a fairly sordid sex scandal in which he was accused of using state funds to facilitate an affair with one of his aides. And without explanation, Luther just dropped the investigation, and then he was appointed to a seat in the Senate. Now, I don't want to jump to conclusions, but I also don't want to be the village idiot. This was political quid pro quo in a style that deserved to have been described by Dante in one of the lower circles of hell. But Luther is then the candidate for this office, but because he got the seat under this cloud of dubious circumstances, and because somehow he was not conservative enough, he did not win the primary nomination in Alabama. So Alabama Republicans chose instead one of the most comical candidates ever to take a national stage. He was called Judge Roy Moore, but he had been removed from the bench twice for defiantly refusing to obey a Supreme Court decision, which, if you're in the judicial system, if you're a judge and not obeying the Supreme Court, that just, there's something seriously amiss there. And he was trying in both instances to adorn our democracy with his own brand of fundamentalist evangelical theocracy. The first time, as you recall, was for placing a stone monument of the Ten Commandments on the courthouse lawn that he then repeatedly refused to remove. The second time was when he had won re-election, and he told court clerks that they did not have to give marriage licenses to same-sex couples. So during the campaign, Moore even flouted his religious prejudices while waving this tiny little handgun that would have embarrassed anybody I know that's a gun owner. You know, if you're gonna say that you're a big Second Amendment guy, I think you want to choose a better gun than that. But also his penchant for trying to impersonate real cowboys by wearing ill-fitting cowboy hats and riding a horse like someone that had never met a horse before. But the real kicker came in November when women started coming forward to tell their stories of having been sexually assaulted, or at least solicited by Moore, when they were teenagers, one of whom was only 14 years old, and Moore was already an attorney in his 30s. I don't remember what the total count got up to, but when it was 8, when I was reading about this regularly, but it got up to 8, and at that point I spoke with my older brother, who is a Methodist pastor in Alabama, and he cautioned me not to believe in hearsay. And I'm like, 8 people banned from going to the mall in hearsay. Now, there was reason to fear that in spite of being a very clear racist, a homophobe, an Islamophobe, to beat that, a xenophobe, and an incompetent lawyer, only then compounded by credible charges of pedophilia, that he still might win the popular vote in Alabama. our own Teresa Armstrong, and I sent this to her, George, she's not in the room, but Teresa cautioned on social media, don't blame this on black voters. This is a white people problem. And of course, it is a white people problem. In the end, even though he lost, more than 70% of white voters in Alabama voted for a known pedophile who was, even before you put the pedophilia in the balance, an absolutely horrible, unqualified, and embarrassment of a candidate. So I can agree with Teresa in saying that this is a white people problem. I'm just not sure that I agreed with the point that she was making at the time, because even though it was an embarrassing white problem, the one thing that saved America from this guy, and I know Ted Cruz was on pins and needles because, you know, the question in the Senate is who has to sit beside Ted Cruz. This guy could have become less popular than Ted Cruz if he had been sent to Washington as a senator. But what saved us from Roy Moore was black voters. It's a white problem. It's a white problem. It's a white problem, but it had a black solution, particularly a black women solution, who voted 98% for Jones. Now, I have to admit a certain level of curiosity. If I could just get a little time to talk to some of that 2% of black women that voted for Moore. Am I alone saying there's some splaining to be done here, brothers and sisters? There's got to be something going on. They marked the wrong line or something. But Teresa, if you'll allow me to say as much, while it is a white voter problem, we are entirely dependent on the conscience of black voters to save us from ourselves. Republicans have done everything legal that they can do for the last 50 years to suppress black voters, and, well, 100 years, to suppress black vote. And economic and social pressures also foster a kind of voter apathy in minority voting districts, as well as the absurdity of gerrymandering. I don't want to go too deep in the weeds here, but gerrymandering makes your votes almost irrelevant. That in communities of color in the South, they have gerrymandered those communities to such a degree that voting hardly matters. But still, if we care about democracy, you have to vote. You have to. So we woke up on Wednesday morning feeling like maybe we dodged a bullet. But before we went to bed on Tuesday, I'd been saying to my friends this thought that I just really couldn't get past, that win or lose, the issue remains that the overwhelming majority of white voters in Alabama voted for the most obviously unqualified, immoral, and embarrassing candidate ever to run for political office since last November. And here is the issue that I've been coming back to over and over for the past several months. These are, by and large, church people. These are church people. These are people who've been going to Sunday school. They've been going to Bible studies. They've worshiped. They've prayed. They've sung the hymns. They've participated in the sacraments. Most of them were baptized, in which the liturgy of their baptism asked them to renounce sin and to choose to live in a manner that reflected the life of Jesus of Nazareth. They, like we, are steeped in scriptures that teach radical compassion, that demand that we care for the sick and the poor, that we welcome the foreign stranger, that we visit the imprisoned, that we clothe the naked, feed the hungry, and stand ready to give a drink of water to the thirsty. How do you square that circle between church and that kind of voting? Now, this is not exactly scripture, but I'm starting to think it probably ought to be. Maya Angelou's famous advice that when someone shows you who they are, you should believe them the first time. Now, I'm going to address this issue more concretely and specifically the last Sunday in January, but suffice it to say today that Southern evangelicals have shown us who they are. Amen. They have shown us. And we need to start believing them. I don't say that to be divisive, and I'm sincere about that. I really don't mean to draw a rigorous line and just cast them off. I don't want to judge, reject, or stop talking to my own brother for that matter. But when people are willing to vote for sexual predators, pedophiles, racists, if they're willing to undercut health care for the poor, if they're willing to take away health care for children, if they're willing to take away housing and food, then we're not buying your phony religious front. You've been hiding behind that crap for years, and we're not even going to pretend to take your religion seriously anymore.
Preach.
But we do want to be in conversation with them. We want to be able to reach out across the divide between conservatives and liberals. But conservatives, we need this from you. We need for you to be better people.
Amen.
We need for you to be more honest. We need for you to place value in depth of character. We need to see that you love democracy. We need to see you struggling to overcome your history of racism, of prejudice, of sexism, and of exclusivism, whether it's your political party, your nation, or your religion. Now, I know that there are no evangelicals in this building unless they got lost on their way somewhere else. And I know that our internet audience is all self-selected, so by and large, we're just a bunch of liberals and agnostics and Unitarians and humanists. But I'm going to ask all of you to repost this on your social media when this clip comes out, because this is a message that evangelicals really need to hear. Faith without works is dead. To pretend to be religious in your self-congratulatory church gatherings while still voting for racist, pedophiles, xenophobes, homophobes, and greedy capitalists is hypocrisy on your part and a direct insult to the Jesus you claim to value.
Amen.
This past year has been enough for all of us to start singing Sting's song. We've lost our faith in politicians. We've lost our faith in the Holy Church. We've lost our faith in the people we see on TV. And we've known for a long time there's no such thing as a military solution. And we've seen far too often when even the miracles of science and progress are turned into something worse. Now, we believe in forgiveness and reconciliation. I'm going to speak for you to our global audience. We believe in forgiveness and reconciliation. We long for some unity of spirit. But you can't play tennis if there's no one on the other side of the net. We want to engage our more conservative sisters and brothers in meaningful dialogue, but that requires honesty, integrity, character, and a sincere value for ethics. And there is no way to say this other than to just put it plainly. Those are things we've not seen on your side of the equation for a long, long time. We don't need to have only liberal churches in the world, and we don't need to only have democratic socialists in this country. We need at least a two-party system. For me, I wish we had 3 or 4 or 5 viable parties. But we can't have just one. But our two-party system looks like it's collapsing right now while Republicans are burning their own house down while they're still in it. I implore you to save yourselves from yourselves. The election of a Democratic senator in Alabama has been trumpeted as being something of a miracle, but it was a special election in more ways than one. And Jones will be up for re-election in just 3 years, at which time they couldn't find a worse candidate to run against him, right? I mean, we're not going to see many contests between a legitimate candidate and a Roy Moore ever again. They'll find someone with more desirable qualities and fewer skeletons in his closet. So this may be a very temporary glitch in the dark red state of Alabama. But for most of my life, we've been talking about a new South arising from the ghosts of the ashes of the Civil War. A South that rises above the racism, anti-intellectualism that has been so easily associated with even a Southern accent, with the regions of the old Confederacy just devoted to doing nothing more than putting lipstick on the pig of old racism. Donald Trump and Roy Moore have gone a long way towards killing off any faith we've had in the New South. And yet, all that the racist, sexist, homophobes, and classes need to win is for us to give up. And my friends, that is the one thing we cannot do.
Thank you for watching our videos. We are entirely dependent on the donations of our listeners and members. We hope that you find this content to be important enough to help us to keep offering these videos to the public at no charge by becoming a regular contributor. Please click on the donate button on our website at www.spfccc.org. Thank you for your support of progressive religious programming.